You're listening to the Men's Dating Mastery Podcast with host Alec Chase, bringing you the experts in dating, sex, and relationships.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of MDM. My guest today is Dr. David Tian, who is a top dating coach in Asia. This episode is easily the most fun recording that I have had to date, and I went a little bit overboard as a result. So this episode is longer than what I typically strive for, but it's still under 15 minutes, so it's nothing too crazy. In this conversation, David and I cover a broad range of topics. We kick it off by talking about neuroscience, emotional responses, and their direct effect on your interactions with women. We then talk about David's formula for a man's attractiveness, which in turn leads us into a discussion about cultivating emotional strength and using honesty to get there. However, David also cautions against obsessing over various systems and frameworks to fix this area of your life. Instead, he emphasizes the importance of making a commitment to actually put in the work that it requires. I also asked David about the unique challenges that Asian men face in dating in North America, which I find comes up quite a bit. Having lived in North America, David is really knowledgeable in this area and provides some very pragmatic advice. To wrap up the episode, David shares a really wild story about his encounter with the Chinese mafia, and I'm not going to spoil it for you, but trust me, you will want to stick around to the end to hear it. I had a blast recording this episode, which is why I allowed time to slip away from me on this one, and I really hope that you enjoy listening. As always, if you like what you hear, then please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Without further ado, here's Dr. David Tian. Hey David, welcome.
Hey, great to be here.
Can you start by providing just a little bit of background about yourself? So talk about your academic background, because I find that tends to have a more intellectually inclined audience. And then tell us a little bit about what you do currently and how you got here.
Great. Well, I love speaking to an academically or intellectually inclined audience. Well, my background. So I did a PhD in the University of Michigan in a few different fields. So it was an interdisciplinary PhD that led to me being a professor in the Department of Philosophy at the National University of Singapore, which is one of the major research universities in all of Asia. And the PhD work was in the area of religious philosophy and psychology. And I ended up teaching at the undergrad and graduate level courses in moral psychology, moral philosophy, ethics, philosophy of religion, Buddhism, Confucianism, and the Asian religions, as well as just philosophical psychology. And I've now been collaborating for the past few years, or longer than a few years, with the top social psychologists and evolutionary psychologists in the region on empirical research in social and in evolutionary psychology. So that's what I've been doing currently. My academic background is in so these different areas: philosophy, psychology, Asian history, and religion. And you're probably wondering why am I listening to this guy on this dating podcast? My interest in psychology led me to take more of an empirically grounded approach to figuring out dating and women and socializing. So at the time when I was trying to figure out women, which was over 10 years ago, when I was going through this crisis, having come out of a bad marriage, and I was just equally to blame in the failure of that relationship, because I just had no clue what I was doing. It was over 10 years ago. And just trying to pick the pieces of my life back up together and try to put it together, I found that there was a lot of crap online. There was a lot of there's a lot of woo-hoo, airy-fairy, new age kind of crap that I tried out just because there was no other choice, right? But I also found that there was a lot of research in psychology and social psychology specifically, and then later in evolutionary psychology, and now in the past 5 years or so, actually 5, 6 years, in neuroscience and neuropsychology. that are directly relevant to dating and relationships and romance and love. So I got really excited about that research in social psychology and so on. Then I started to allow that to influence the way I interacted with women in person, and this quickly became effective and became my style, the way I interact with people. So I don't generally think along the lines of the guys you might find online who are peddling like pickup stuff or even just generic dating advice. Instead, most of the way I think is, well, it's heavily influenced by the empirical sciences.
That's fantastic. That's actually precisely why I wanted to speak with you today, because that's the approach that appeals to me personally. And that tends to be a little bit more popular on this podcast as well. One of the most popular episodes that we've had was actually resident and PhD of clinical psychology. And we talked about evolutionary psychology. Exactly. So that's the kind of stuff I love to get into. And that's the kind of stuff that our audience likes to hear.
Cool.
And on that tangent, I'd like to ask you something you've been referring to in some of your materials, and that's men's emotions. And specifically, you reference something called mirror neurons and the amygdala. So can you talk a little bit about what they are and, you know, how they're relevant to guys' emotions, and specifically when it comes to guys trying to get better with women?
Yeah, sure. So wow, there's so many different ways to approach this. But let's break down mirror neurons first, and then we'll go from there. So the science of mirror neurons is pretty well understood. I mean, like pretty well accepted across the field, and it's so well accepted that now the news thing is to come out and say, no, there are no mirror neurons. Like that's how basic it is now. So if you guys are listening and you think you're intellectual, but you don't know what mirror neurons are, you are like 20 years behind. So just to let you know what they are, there are neurons in the brain that are in parts of the brain that are more primitive. Strictly speaking, mirror neurons aren't really located in the amygdala as far as we've seen, but they are in the sensory motor areas, the areas between the prefrontal cortex and the brain stem. And that means that they were evolved pretty early in the evolution of the Homo sapien. And what's interesting about the fact that they're not in the prefrontal cortex. Oh, wait. So first of all, what do they do? So a mirror neuron in the brain is it triggers a reciprocal feeling based on the visual and other stimuli that that the brain perceives. So in other words, if you suddenly turn and you see somebody just freaked out of their minds, like just really scared, your brain won't process it through a logical connection of, oh, I see that person's eyebrows are going up at this angle, therefore this person's afraid. No, we just immediately perceive it as the feeling of fear. So in a way, what happens is we feel the other person's fear, and that triggers other emotions in us, like run or other thoughts that we have, like fight or flight. And that's why it's so closely related to the amygdala, because it's the brainstem is where the fight and flight reflexes are coming up.
So essentially what you're saying is these neurons allow us to mirror the emotions of another person.
Well, they don't just allow us, they force us. So basically it's not like there's a choice. You're doing it no matter what. And she is feeling it no matter what. The only question is, are you in control of it or are you not?
Right.
They're already happening. It's not like it allows it, it forces it. So if you're feeling nervous as fuck, she's going to feel it. It doesn't fucking matter if you think you're not showing it. She will feel it. So if you're not in control of that, or if you're not even aware of it, you better figure it out. Because this is exactly what's going on.
Right.
There's no hiding from it. So it's not like just some option we can like pull out the mirror neurons trick. It's already happening all the time. And this is accepted, this is just basic, basic neuropsychology, that this is happening. And now the debates within the field are more fine-grained. So they're about whether it primes action, like physical action. So if you see somebody who's really into shooting a basketball, right? You see like the emotion on their face when they're shooting it, there's a debate whether your body starts to mimic that movement. I think that's not a mainstream view. It's a lot easier to prove the emotional response. So that's pretty well accepted. So there's this emotional response. So if the stronger the emotion is felt in the other person, the quicker and stronger that you will feel it in yourself when you observe it. And that what's the word? The process is happening through these neurons that mirror these emotional stimuli that you're perceiving.
Right. So basically what we're getting at here is these processes are ongoing, they influence our emotions, and we have an opportunity to essentially make them work to our advantage by learning how to gain control over them. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, sure. And as far as how it helps to attract women, well, first of all, most men are completely unaware of their own emotional lives. Right. So if you ask a guy, how are you feeling? What are you feeling right now? He'll generally just give you a bunch of thoughts, and he'll like give you these logical thoughts, right? When basically what you're trying to get at instead is, what are you feeling? Give me some emotions. Are you scared, frightened? Are you humiliated? Do you feel shy? Do you feel insecure? Do you feel awkward? Do you feel elated, joyful? And most men aren't, or sorrow or anguish rather than sad. Most men don't have a sophisticated gauge or sense of their own emotional lives. And because they're not even aware of their own emotions, there's just no possible way that they can positively influence or have any control over their influence of a woman when they're interacting with her.
Okay, great. So now we're getting into the stuff that I really want to talk about. I was hoping you could talk a little bit about a formula I've heard you mention in the past, and this one it goes like this: emotional strength plus honesty equals attractiveness. So I think that would be a good segue into exploring this whole topic a little bit deeper. And I was hoping you could break that formula down, explain how it works, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah, great. Well, I appreciate that you've gone through the material and come up with these questions. These are great. So the formula again is attractiveness equals emotional strength plus honesty or honest expression. There was an easy way to remember. A equals SH, so ash. So this mnemonics help. So the idea there is that emotional. So we kind of know what attractiveness is. I mean, we can go into more detail, but I think we have a general idea. So this is the attractiveness of you as a man. Okay, so your attractiveness as a man is equal to your degree of emotional strength, and then whether you're able to honestly express it. So what does emotional strength mean? The most basic level, it means the degree to which you lack neediness, or conversely, or a different way of putting it is the degree to which you are independent, right? So that you can stand on your own 2 feet. You don't need a woman to love you or to cuddle you or to tell you everything's going to be all right, or to hold you basically at night or whatever it is that you've been pining after. And you can be totally cool with that. You can be fine and your life will go well. You won't be sad or lonely, but you will be able to pursue your passions in life, your purposes in life. And in a way, you're kind of like a little bit more masculine in that sense of being more calloused towards the need for tenderness, and cushion and all that basically a baby would need from his mother. So how strong are you emotionally? Can you detach yourself from the outcome and not be needy towards it? Okay, so that's one way of cashing out emotional strength. And then honesty is just, well, first of all, and so honesty is honest expression. And first of all, this requires that you know what's going on internally in you, in your thoughts and feelings. Because game, effectively, for naturals or for those who have made it a natural part of their lives, who've internalized attractiveness, who become attractive, is simply a matter of expressing yourself honestly. Now, honestly doesn't mean that you're boring and always straightforward and predictable. Right? You can always flirt and white lies and so on, and that's just all part of the flirting banter. But what I mean by honesty is that you are expressing yourself in congruence with your emotional strength. So, for instance, if she pokes fun at you and you feel insecure or a little bit awkward, instead of trying to hide your awkwardness because you know it's impossible because she's picking up on it through her mirror neurons, okay, she's already feeling it. And whether she's self-aware enough to realize that that is caused by your awkwardness, or whether she just feels raw awkwardness and wants to go away from you, it doesn't really matter. She's feeling awkward and you lose, right? Because you messed it up. Why? Because you weren't honest with yourself and her. So if you're feeling awkward and trying to hide it, that's the worst thing you could do. If you're feeling awkward, be honest and say, I'm feeling awkward right now and I don't know why. Or if you do know why, that's even better. Tell her why. Because, just tell her whatever it is. And then by saying it out loud, you actually go to the place where you're strongest, which is your honest expression. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So it sounds like the key here is developing emotional strength. So I'd love it if you could talk about this framework that you have. You have a very logical and a very sound process for guys to follow in order to develop that emotional strength. So I was wondering if you could talk about it. You define emotions and what they mean, and then the process of essentially identifying, questioning, and then reframing those emotions. So I was wondering if you could just walk us through that.
Okay, right. Well, there are many. So here's a mistake that a lot of guys make when they come, when they want to get better with women, when they want to figure out relationships and this whole women thing, right? They'll go online and they'll look for advice, but often they're lazy. So the average human being is really lazy. If they can get it fast and easy, they'll take that route, right? But often the world doesn't reward you for that. Like the world and the universe rewards you for hard work, sticking with it, and for doing it right the first time. I mean, but usually the right road is usually the harder road. So here's something I get a lot of guys coming at me because and writing to me because they've read or seen some video training or read an article, and they think that they have my system. Like they're always looking for a system. Something I learned from copywriting. Say you have a system. And the thing is, if you're really good at something, you have many systems for many things. In other words, for each skill set involved in this area, there could be a system in each of these skills. And one of the biggest mistakes guys make is they don't respect how important this area of their lives is. So in school, you'll go to engineering and you'll learn chemistry, physics, biology, or whatever, maths. And each of these areas can be broken down into subdisciplines. And you treat them very seriously because there is a course on them in a textbook that you have to pay $100 to buy, and then you got to read it and so on, right? You can major in it. But when it comes to applied psychology, nobody is taught that in school. And so they think of it more like a hobby, right? So being good with women is sort of like, I don't know, knitting. You know what I mean?
Right.
And here's the thing, to all the guys listening. As long as you treat it like a hobby, you're never going to get good at it. That's just the straight up truth. If, however, you treat it as one of the 3 most important areas of your life, right up there with health and having enough resources to get food and shelter, the next thing in terms of your happiness and well-being is relationships, and especially relationships with the opposite sex, because of mating and also because of for romance and love. So if you take it seriously, then you'll realize that I have many formulas, guys. And one of them is the ASH that we were just talking about, right? The attractiveness equals strength and honesty. And there's a way of just using that one formula to fix everything. And then there's a way of a different formula that involves what you were referring to, Alec, about the identifying, questioning, reframing. So that's another rubric. That's another system and another formula. And you can bring them together and combine them, and they can strengthen each other. But they're actually distinct because within the year-long curriculum of Order University, or what it used to be called the Total Transformation program, these were in separate modules. So ASH was a formula that was taught earlier. And here's how you can get better with just knowing those three concepts, right? And this goes back to, I learned this first from a 14th century Chinese philosopher named Wang Yangming in his the doctrine of the unity of knowledge and action. How do you know where you're weak? So it's all about emotional strength. How do you know where you're weak? Well, you have to go out there and go out in the world, talk to women, and express yourself honestly. That is, and especially whenever you feel insecure, don't hide it. Whenever you're unsure of what to do, don't hide that you're unsure of what to do. Just blurt it out there. Put out whatever is going on in your mind and put it out into the world. Be honest. Honesty itself is a great aphrodisiac. And then you'll see that you're weak, right? Just like by telling a girl that you're awkward, you don't know why you're awkward, or maybe you do, you think maybe she's beautiful and you haven't talked to a woman that's beautiful before. And that in itself sounds weak, but fuck, man, I don't know any girl, if you say it sincerely, who isn't going to be impressed. I mean, who isn't going to feel complimented, like in a good way, right? You just sort of like made her day. But you have to be sincere. And obviously, if you're honest, it's sincere. But you've just identified a weakness. You've identified a weakness in yourself that you were denying. And one of those, and what you pointed out, was that you're not used to being around beautiful women, as beautiful as her, so get around more of them. And the second is, because you're not used to it, you're feeling awkward, right? And basically, instead of pretending to be stronger than you are, you have to just go to where you are in terms of your strength. But that is the feedback from the world to tell you which areas that you need to keep working on.
Well, that's really powerful stuff, but I can see exactly where guys might be hesitant to do that, because say you are an emotionally strong, confident guy, then sure, expressing yourself honestly is the natural thing to do because all you're doing is expressing your strengths. However, if you are a guy who's feeling insecure, you're really shy, you're not that confident in yourself, you're not that confident around the girls you're attracted to, how do you convince that guy to go and express himself honestly? Because all he's going to be thinking, well, if I express myself honestly, then she's going to think that I'm just this really nerdy, insecure, weak guy. And like, why would I want to display that?
That's exactly it. Thank you. I'm not in the job of convincing anybody of anything, by the way. So if he doesn't want to do it, fuck him, right? But that's my whole pre-framing of saying, dude, this is the third or possibly the most important area of your life. If you don't get it fixed, you got to man up. If you don't get it fixed, then think about what your life's going to be like at the end of your life. You're going to regret everything. And if he's ready to dive in, then I tell him, that's exactly what you need to face that fear. That's exactly what you need to do. You need to let her, well, so whatever it is, it could be that fear, exactly what you just voiced. You could tell her, look, I'm feeling really awkward right now, but I'm a big nerd. I'm afraid you'll find out that I'm a big nerd. And what other words, awesome words did you use there to describe the loser self?
Nerdy, insecure,
yes,
weak, lacking confidence, all those.
Yes, so perfect. You tell her, look, I am a nerd. I lack confidence. I am weak. I don't know what to say. And when I'm around women, I'm completely tongue-tied. In fact, he probably wouldn't say it like the way I just said it because it was quite articulate. He'd probably say something like this. When I'm around women, I just have no luck with women. I get really nervous and fuck it. I'm just really insecure. That's the thing. That's why I came out here. And I thought maybe if I talk to you, a beautiful woman like you, I could get over my insecurity. Because this guy David, he told me, he's like a big brother. He told me if I did this, it would help. But I don't know if it's helping. But here I am. He just told me, tell her whatever you're thinking. This is what I'm thinking. So there you go.
So how's that going to help?
Are you kidding? That's fucking awesome. That is the only game that will ever work for him. Only. If he goes out there and tries to hide it with some bullshit lines he learned from the internet, it's going to fucking be worse.
Well, she's going to see right through it. I agree with you, but not that I'm getting pushy. Maybe I am getting pushy. But
please do. I don't mind.
I guess the question is, so he does that. How's he going to benefit from it?
Oh, you mean down the road after that one interaction?
Well, it doesn't matter. It could be in the moment or down the road, whichever. But what's the growth that's going to occur for him?
Oh, wonderful. Yes.
And how is he going to eventually get better with women by doing what you just described?
let me use an analogy. So when you're working out at the gym, you could pick up, if you can really only curl a 10 kg weight or a 10-pound weight, but you pick up a 30-pound weight because you don't want anyone to see, how is that guy going to get stronger, or is he going to injure himself?
No, probably hurt himself and then stop working out.
Just in order to lift it, so he's not just like, so he's actually doing something with his arms, he's going to have to swing, right? He's going to swing back, and it's just going to be awful, but he's going to trick himself into thinking he's better, way better than he is. And everybody who knows what they're doing is going to look at him and think, what a loser. What is he doing? He's not going to grow. And a lot of this has to do with your ego and your pride. And this is where moral philosophy comes into it. It's the same thing if you want people to become good moral beings. You can't let them think that they're good and moral when they're not. They have to confront the real world and the dilemmas of the world and work those problems out. In the moment, the most attractive thing a guy can possibly do or say is the honest thing. Everybody respects honesty because it's attractive and it takes courage to do. Even if he's coming from a weak point, like if you're in the gym, you see some skinny guy curling a 5-pound weight, but he is struggling, but he's got good form, you respect that and he will grow. You understand? So she in the moment, if she's not a psychopath, she in the moment will respect that and will be attracted to the fact that he even is self-aware enough to say it or to know it, strong, and then courageous enough to say it.
This actually reminds me of something else. I don't know if you've heard of Jason Comley. He came up with this game called Rejection Therapy. Does that ring a bell?
I did see it in your list of podcasts, but I haven't heard it.
To put it in a nutshell, the man had pretty severe social anxiety, which he, through self-reflection, self-analysis, traced back to basically a pretty strong fear of rejection. And his way of handling it was to go out and intentionally get rejected once a day, every single day until it went away. And it did. And what he ended up finding out after the fact or in the process is that this technique that he came up with was actually, it wasn't a new concept. It existed. It was based in a psychotherapeutic technique called flooding. And basically what you do with flooding is you expose yourself to whatever it is that you're afraid of, assuming that your fear is irrational. So you're not afraid of, I don't know, like the black cobra, which can actually kill you, but you're afraid of rejection, or you're afraid of talking to a pretty girl, which actually poses no real threat. It's predominantly in your mind. And so the benefit of doing this is the more you do this, the more you give your mind an opportunity to look at things a little bit more rationally and to realize that this is actually not that big of a deal. And eventually that nervousness, that fear subsides and you become comfortable with doing what you're doing. So in a way, what you're describing to me reminds me of that process as well. What I'm envisioning is, a guy who's super nervous around girls, particularly attractive girls, going up to them and just speaking honestly and being a little nerdy about it, just the way you mimicked a little earlier on. But the more he does it, the more he realizes that he comes out intact on the other side, the more he's probably going to start communicating with those same women more and more confidently as time goes on. Yes. The concept of flooding itself, it can be a little bit dangerous in the sense that if you inundate his senses if you go too far with it, then the guy will just cave in and give up. So what you were referring to as far as the rejection therapy is just normal, like as far as just like trying to get over something, right? So if you're trying to get over, if you're trying to learn math, you should just do it every day, right? You just do it as much as you can until you're so exhausted that you stop and you do it in rest and you do it again. It's just like working out, right? You have to go to failure or you won't build a muscle. If you just do the movement around, but you're not getting to failure, then you're not actually going to build muscle. You're just going to build some endurance or pump some blood in that muscle. So gradual desensitization is another way that you could combine it so that you don't just throw them completely in the deep end and just say, hey man, just be honest, right? Like that would just be like literally throwing the guy in the deep end and just telling him to tread water, right? But instead you could do it gradually. So you take him to an environment that's not super, super scary, maybe like a meetup event or, someplace where it's less intimidating and less intimidating women, and you tell him to work on it there first, and then you gradually move him up. So
that would be the best way to do it, to just gradually move him into and desensitize him to the stimuli. But the environment and the challenge has to be just enough that it will cause him to be nervous and feel like this is something new and this is something scary that he's got to overcome, because that's the only time learning ever happens. I'm constantly in my life looking for new challenges all the fucking time. I'm always looking for times to place myself into a room where I don't know anything, or that I could be the dumbest person in the room, the poorest person in the room, the person with like the worst in the room, because then I know I will have the highest potential to grow.
Right. And that's actually very consistent with how Jason described it as well. When he was working to get over his fear of rejection, he started really small. He would start by asking somebody for the time or asking for directions. And then day by day, he, in very small increments, upped the ante until he was asking for some pretty outrageous things. But if he had started with that, he'd just be overwhelmed. And he actually quoted a couple of examples where he went too big and he couldn't do it. I mean, essentially, to me, it really sounds like stepping out of your comfort zone one step at a time and allowing it to expand over time.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. It's not anything complicated. We already do this all the time everybody did this when they were babies. This is just how learning happens.
David, I just want to do a time check with you. We've scheduled this for 30 minutes and we've kind of used that up. I've got a couple of questions I'd love to get into, but I don't want to take any time that you don't have.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, no problem.
So there's a very specific question that I really wanted you, out of all people, to answer, because I think
thanks.
I think you'd be able to offer better insight than most other people out there on this. And that's specifically with respect to Asian guys living and dating in North America. So I'm sure you're familiar with the stereotype that Asian guys have a harder time dating in North America than guys of other racial backgrounds. So I was wondering if you could address that, maybe talk about some of the stereotypes, both the positive and the negative, and then provide some solutions for guys that might feel like they are facing challenges in this particular regard.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So, yeah, this used to be one of my hobby horses. I like to talk about this. And I actually discovered that by highlighting a problem, you actually end up helping it grow. You know, like, like when you're putting sunlight onto a plant, right? It just grows more. So the more you think about it as a problem, the more it becomes a bigger deal. And that's one of the problems among the Asian guys in North America. They're turning it into a much bigger problem than it really should be. And here's something that's really cool for you guys Asian guys living in North America. I spent a lot of my time in Asia because I love the Asian food, as I'm sure you guys can understand. I love living on a beach, in the Southeast Asia. And I love culture and history of the place. And so I stay out here a lot of the time. And what I've discovered is every time I go back to North America, every year I go back, the Asian guys that I see, and I'm not talking about my friends, but I'm talking about like just coming into the immigration area, and I see immigration officers who are Asian. I see Asian police officers and just Asian people all around, and especially Northeast America and in around Toronto and in California. There are a lot. Every year they're getting more alpha. So, hey, kudos to you guys holding it down, man. But every year I see guys just stepping it up. And soon this won't be a problem, like day to day. It's still a problem in pop media. It's still a problem in Hollywood depictions, and that's going to have to be addressed at a systemic level. But day to day, women don't think about your skin color. I mean, our skin color is pretty similar to white skin color, depending on how tanned you get. It's not like physically they're perceiving you as that different. It's like we were talking about earlier. It's in your head in a way. So the negative stereotypes that come up with Asian guys are that they're nerdy, that they're all into math, that they only do computers. Wait, those are good things. Negative stereotypes are that they're physically weak, they're short, they're girly, like they're feminine. What are some other things? They're socially awkward. They have small penises. I think that's still out there. That's mostly perpetrated by men. And what else? Oh, they're boring and logical, straightforward. So that may not, but they're boring and logical. So I guess those are negative things. And they're very family oriented, so they live with their moms or something like that. right? Can you add any other negative stereotypes? Because I try not to think about the negative ones, so it's like coming up with something that I haven't thought about in a while. Is that pretty much it?
We don't need to bury guys in
Okay.
negative stereotypes. So let's talk about the positive ones too, and then let's talk about how they can work with both.
I did this talk where I just listed all these negative stereotypes, and everybody in the audience was laughing so hard because they're true in order for them to be stereotypes. And but then there are positive ones from being Asian, and like I was saying when I started off, they're good at math, good at computers, because these will generate money. Responsible, hardworking, diligent, good to your parents, so you're respectful, and treats so respectful, kind, and I think that's about it for them. And I guess maybe does kung fu. So I think that's less of an issue. And you can see how like pretty much every race has positive and negative stereotypes associated with it. And it was a thing of the past. I think if you're in a smaller town in North America, you probably are still dealing with the stereotypes that were floating around 5 years ago, where it would end up that an Asian guy would have to make X amount of dollars more in online dating in order to just be equal to like a white person, a white guy. Yeah, but in real life, like live interactions, if you can display more of the universally attractive traits that women are looking for than the other guys in the room, then it really doesn't matter that you are of a certain race or that you're not fitting exactly what she was thinking she'd hook up with. So some of these universally attractive traits include just confidence, wittiness, intelligence, dominance, social influence. Like, do other people listen to you when you talk? Do they ask you for your opinion? Do other people follow you? So that would be coming to dominance. And social savvy. A lot of these are obvious. There's a list in our Or Dating Academy of just over 20 universally attractive traits just based on the empirical research. And if you outdo the white guys or the black guys or the Latino guys or whoever is there on these universally attractive traits, she can't help but be more attracted to you, or at least be as equally attracted to you. So instead of worrying so much about the stereotypes, just focus on making yourself into an attractive man, period. All right. And then here's something else for the Asian guys is that you look at the negative stereotypes and just make sure you don't come anywhere near those. So if one of the negative stereotypes is physically weak or soft, nerdy, then make sure you don't look nerdy. So there's like a nerd chic, like a geek chic look that some guys can rock. But if you're an Asian guy and you rock geek chic, it can be too close to the negative stereotype that it won't come off sexy. All right. So if you wear your cool fitted shirt, but you button it up way to the top, so it's all the way up to the top, and you're wearing big like Harry Potter glasses and sort of a kind of like well-dressed hipster kind of guy, that could look great on a tall white dude with a beard who looks like he smokes weed and stuff. But if you're like a soft-looking Asian guy because your face maybe got great skin, so you look younger than you are, and so on, you're better to stay away from those sorts of those sorts of looks and go for something that's a little edgier, more masculine, a little bit more action hero look, and that will help to offset that stereotype. Just the same thing for black guys. I mean, if the black stereotype, if it's that you are a gangbanger, you're in jail, you dropped out of school, if those are the negative stereotypes, then the thing you should do is stay completely away from those. And I mean, like guys like since Dizzy Gillespie's period, they knew about that. Like, come in a suit, look like the corporate guy, and it'll really throw people off. Like, come in a Tom Ford suit, and it'll really throw people off. Rather than you just coming in like a gangster, then it's just, oh, he's another, gangster. And so it's sort of the opposite for the Asian guys.
It sounds like creating an intentional contrast against
Yes.
whatever the pre-existing stereotype might be.
Exactly.
That's great. Got a question for you just for fun, and you totally don't have to answer this if you don't want to. But I came across some references to you fighting with the Japanese Yakuza, wrestling
yeah.
with the Chinese mafia, training in the Chinese underground. What's all that about?
Yeah. Oh man. So these are all really long stories. In fact, like all of these stories, I've managed to work them in to telling girls. I don't do that anymore because all the girls know these. They see my stuff online, so I can't use that shit no more. But for like 5 or 6 years, these stories are getting me laid too, man. So there was like a good outcome. What's a quick one? There was a girl I was dating in China, and so there are some other recordings out there where I talk about how I get tussled with the Yakuza. That was just one encounter, thank God. But with the Chinese mafia, that was an ongoing thing, and they weren't so much mafia. It was more of it was an underground criminal group that ran prostitution rings and mostly prostitution, but in a big way. So it was big money prostitution and some gambling. I think there was some gambling dens. I wasn't too sure about that part of it, and I was trying to get this girl that I was seeing, who was a mama-san in one of their big, like 5-story brothels. I was trying to get her to quit and not to have to do that, not to be there anymore. But they had a bond on her. So I went in there and I tried to negotiate with the guy because she's like, you go talk to him because you're from Canada and you're really interesting. And, this was back in '06, around then. So this is pre-Olympics, and it was in a suburb of Beijing. So you go past Fifth Ring Road. It's pretty far out in a whole other municipality. So they weren't used to seeing Chinese Canadian kids who could speak Chinese fluently and doing a PhD and all that. So she's like, I mentioned him to you, and he wants to meet you. And I'd already had contacts with a lot of the girls who were working there. So this was after I started getting hooked up with their social circle. So anyway, I went over to ask him to let her go, and just getting into that office was pretty scary. There was like many levels of security, but he was curious enough. He wanted to meet me, and he wanted me to help him plan a hit on somebody.
Oh no!
That's why he wanted to see me. He's like, we need a new perspective. Something no one's ever thought about. You don't know any of our game plans. You come up with it. And he's the kind of guy, he's total caricature, right? He's like chewing on chewing on toothpicks. He's got all this jade jewelry. That was their thing, jade. They had jade bracelets, jade rings. So anyway, they were kind of stereotypical. It was kind of funny to see it, but it was like real life. And I told him, well, I'll do that. I'll help you plan this hit. Well, I'll come up with ideas. I'll brainstorm. If you allow her to quit after a week, like put her 1 week notice or whatever. And he just laughed at me and he's saying, didn't she tell you she's on a bond and all this shit? I'm like, I will pay off the bond. And the bond was just like $1,000 or something. It wasn't much. I mean, to free somebody from slavery, I thought that was a good deal. And yeah, so he's like, there's no way, get the fuck out of here. You weren't what I thought you were. But I didn't move. So the 2 thugs behind me pulled me off the chair and just started kicking me, like in the stomach. They didn't hit me in the face. I don't know. Well, the thing is, like, when your adrenaline is going, you don't really feel anything, right? So, I remember having blood on my face and stuff. So then I said, wait, okay, all right, I'll plan this thing. I'll plan it, I'll help you plan it, and then you'll think about it. Or something like that. I just kind of wanted to get out of there. I didn't want to just lose all face completely. So I just gave him what he wanted. So we came back. So anyway, I helped him plan this. Man, I can't believe I'm saying. I haven't said this on recording yet, but I helped him brainstorm some ideas for a hit. And about a month later, the girl came into my apartment in Beijing, and she threw down this paper. And the paper was this guy. I won't go into the details in case it gets traced back to me, but he didn't end up too well. And, so there's a police investigation, all this stuff. And then she said, guess what? I'm free.
Wow.
Well, she didn't say that. She's like, I don't have to go back for a while. And I said, how long? He's like, well, until they cause me problems. So that was me getting beat. So I got beat up. I didn't I didn't fight back. So yeah, I figured if whoever they had this hit on, he was probably a pretty bad person too. I don't know. They didn't tell me who he was.
That's a hell of a story. Thanks for sharing it. And just for the record, if you change your mind and decide that you want this out, then let me know. I'll take it out because I don't want this coming back to you in a negative way.
So long ago. Well, one of the things that I learned was I never did anything anywhere near this before. Like, I was a conservative, very religious, really buttoned up academic kid. I mean, basically, even though I was almost 30, I was basically like a kid. And over about a period of about a year, I realized that in order to be sexy and adventurous and fun, I had to do things that really scared me, and things that were sexy, like going into the places where there were sexy things going on. And that led to another thing, and just always saying yes as a default, to suggestions. Hey, let's go to this thing. Okay, as the default answer. And that just led me into all these crazy adventures that I'm really, actually looking back, I'm pretty grateful for.
Yeah, talk about expanding your comfort zone. And just for the record, I expect all of the listeners to be pretty intelligent, discerning guys, but just in case, this is not encouraging anybody to go and join the mafia or anything like that.
Yes, please. Yes,
this is for entertainment purposes only.
That's right. Do not attempt this at home. Yes, it's not recommended.
Yeah, so to wrap up, I want to ask you if you could provide just one actionable and tangible piece of advice for guys, something fairly simple that they could actually start with to work on in order to improve their dating lives. And if we could keep it in the context of the conversation we just had, what would it be?
Well, I'm all about working on who you are, like your identity and your character, rather than just like techniques. So I would say, just going on what we were just talking about, there's something out there in your life, that an opportunity that you've had in the past year or so that scares you, that you were afraid to do, but you were interested in it enough that you thought, if I did this, it would be good for me. Maybe something sexy, maybe something dangerous, maybe something adventurous. Maybe you've always wanted to ride a motorcycle, but you're too scared. If you want to conquer women as part of that area of your life, you have to conquer that opportunity. You just say yes, and take that opportunity, and you can thank me later.
Great, thank you. And final question: if guys wanted to learn more about what you do, how you can help them, if they wanted to learn about your products, your services, where can they go?
Thank you. The best place you can go is www.auradating. That's AURA dating.com. auradating.com.
Great. And guys, as always, that link will be in the show notes, so you can check it out there if you don't have time to scramble it down as you're listening. David, thank you so much. Awesome conversation. Really appreciate the extra time that you gave me. This was great.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Hope you enjoyed this episode, guys. If you have become a regular listener of this show, then I have a question for you. I always strive to make these episodes 30 to about 45 minutes long, because as a podcast listener myself, that is what I prefer. And I also assume that you guys are busy, so a shorter episode is easier to fit into your schedule. Obviously, today we went a little bit longer than that. So the question is, how long of an episode do you prefer? You can let me know by going and leaving a comment in the show notes to this episode on mensdatingmastery.com, or by emailing me directly at alec@mensdatingmastery.com. That's Alec with a C. If I get enough responses indicating a similar episode length, then that is what I will shoot for on future episodes. As always, if you're enjoying the show, then please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and to review this podcast in iTunes or in whatever your favorite podcast directory is. Thanks for listening, and until next time.
Thank you for listening to Men's Dating Mastery, a podcast dedicated to improving the lives of men and the women around them.